The market is flooded with credit card offers, and not just from banks and credit unions. Airlines, hotels, and department stores, even video game companies all want you to apply for their cards, and some of the sign-up bonuses are mighty appealing. Applying for a credit card is something you don't want to rush. You need to cut through the marketing hype and understand all the terms, conditions, and fees to find a card that's right for you. I'm Herb Weisbaum, the Consumer Man, a contributing editor at checkbook.org.
Welcome to Consumerpedia at checkbook.org. We're the nonprofit that helps consumers select services, avoid trouble, and save money. Because we don't accept any advertising or take money from any business we recommend, you can rely on checkbook.org to be completely independent and objective. Now, here's the host of Consumerpedia, America's consumer expert, the Consumer Man, Herb Weisbaum.
In this episode, how to compare credit card offers, several things you should do before you even apply for a card. Plus, is a rewards card really right for you? And how a balance transfer credit card can help you pay down that unpaid debt. We have two experts with us for this episode of Consumerpedia, our 50th episode. Yeah, I think that's a call for a little celebration. Ted Rossman is a senior industry analyst at Bankrate.com. Hiya, Ted.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And Sarah Rathner, credit cards expert at NerdWallet. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, great to be here.
So it's nice to have you both with us. A lot of ground to cover, so let's get started. Bottom line, if used properly, there's nothing wrong with having a credit card. It's a great financial tool in your wallet, but when misused, the financial consequences can be devastating. So Ted, before anyone starts shopping around for a credit card, they've got to ask how they handle money and how they're going to use this card.
That big fork in the road is whether or not you carry a balance, because the average credit card charges over 20%, which is a record high. So that's the biggest key. Any reward strategy revolves around paying in full to avoid interest. I know sometimes people apply for credit out of necessity, but gosh, it's tough to build wealth when you're paying the credit card company 20% or more every month. We do find that people often get into credit card debt for very practical things like emergency expenses and day-to-day expenses outpacing their paychecks. But there's also an element of if you're in a hole, stop digging. So if you can, maybe pay off your debt with a 0% balance transfer card or stick to cash or debit until you're debt-free, because credit card rates are very, very high.
Sarah, I know one thing you recommend is that you should find out what your credit score is before you start this entire process. Why would you do that?
Because there are so many credit cards out there to choose from that anything you can do to narrow down the field is going to make the decision that much easier. And one big thing is what you could potentially qualify for. If you have good or excellent credit, the field is much broader. But if you're still building credit, you're still working your way up to that good or excellent credit score, the field is narrower. And so you want to find out what you're more likely to be eligible for so you're not wasting your time applying for cards that are just not right for you.
Ted, there are so many options for credit cards these days, literally hundreds of options. What are the key factors to consider as you try to find the ones that might work best for you?
You really need to consider your personal circumstances. So, first of all, whether or not you carry a balance, that's a huge distinction. You definitely want to know about the interest rate. You want to know about the annual fee, if there is one, foreign transaction fees if you plan on traveling abroad. Credit cards can be free if you get a no annual fee card that you pay off right away. Just make sure that you're aware of your specific circumstances. Sometimes an annual fee is well worth it if it gets you into the airport lounge and gets you other premium benefits, but it's really all about your lifestyle and how you plan to use the card.
A new Bankrate survey just came out. It shows that credit card interest rates are the highest ever. Can you tell us about that?
The average for all credit cards is 20.72%. And we recently took a look at store-branded credit cards, and we found that the average retail card is about 8 points higher than that. 28.93% is the current average there, which is an all-time record. So be especially careful when you're offered a store credit card. This is probably your highest cost debt by a wide margin, which is why it's so important to pay in full if you can, or if you need more time, get a 0% balance transfer card or work with a reputable nonprofit credit counseling agency. or maybe take on a side hustle or cut your expenses. There are a lot of levers you can pull.
Sarah, websites like NerdWallet and Bankrate and Wallet Hub make it easy to see some of the best offers available from the major issuers depending on what you want and your credit history. But these sites don't have cards offered by credit unions, which can have some of the best rates around for those who carry a balance.
Well, credit unions can definitely be compelling options. So if there are credit unions in your area that have really compelling credit card offers, it's absolutely worth adding those cards to your list as you comparison shop to see if they're the best situation for you.
All right, how about for people listening who may be getting their first credit card or someone who has no credit or a slim credit file? What kind of advice do both of you have for those kind of people? Sarah, we'll start with you.
You really want to think about what you're looking for in a credit card, but you also want to focus on the credit behaviors that will help you establish credit and build credit over time. Because for now, you're pretty limited in which kinds of cards you can get. But if you do things like pay all of your bills on time, ideally in full, and you avoid overcharging on your credit card, don't max out that card, use it quite conservatively, then over time, you can build your credit and you can qualify for a higher number of credit cards later on. And so use this credit card as a stepping stone to other options. And it's also a stepping stone to all the other things that a higher credit score can get you, like access to other loans, in some cases, access to rental homes, utilities, and things like that as well.
When you're just starting out, I think what's most important is avoiding fees and interest, establishing good habits, and building your credit score. I don't think you should get too fancy with rewards when you're just starting out. For one, you're probably not spending enough to make it super worthwhile. I would build to that later on, because remember, it doesn't make sense to pay 20% interest just to get 1 or 2 or even 5% in cashback or airline miles. So I tend to think that especially when you're young and new to credit, it's more about establishing those habits. Maybe pick a no annual fee card. Maybe start small. Just put 1 or 2 expense categories on there every month and pay it off right away and build from there.
Yeah, I totally agree. Keep it simple. Maybe put one expense, like one streaming service, $15 a month on that card, pay it in full every month. Do that for a while. And everything else you could use debit or cash.
If I can't get a card because I have poor credit, what about using a secured credit card, and explain how that works?
So a secured credit card requires an upfront cash deposit, and that deposit becomes your credit limit. And over time, if you use the card carefully, many of these cards offer some sort of graduation to an unsecured credit card, which is your more traditional credit card that doesn't require the deposit. They do charge interest, so it is possible to get into debt with these cards. And some of them charge annual fees. So that's another thing to be mindful of, because you do need to budget for the cost of the fee and the deposit, which can be a hardship depending on your situation. And so these are a stepping stone to other cards. It is a way to build credit, but it's also an opportunity to be cautious and use the card carefully. Use it as an educational experience.
Ted, what about becoming an authorized user? Your parents putting you on their cards when you get old enough, and so you start to build up some credit history that way, and then when you're ready and mature to get a card, you sort of have a credit history. Does that make any sense?
I'm a big fan of that approach for a couple reasons. One is that it helps you build credit. And the other one is that it can actually be a stepping stone to more financial responsibility. So I often suggest try to add your kids as authorized users, maybe around age 16 or 17. Because chances are they're starting to drive around then. They're getting more independent with going out with friends and maybe driving themselves to school and paying for certain expenses, but they're still living under your roof. So you still have more teachable moments than if they're off on their own in the real world or at college. So I think it's sort of dual purposes of building credit, which is super important, and piggybacking off that parent's hopefully positive credit history, but also actually using the card, because it is different to use plastic versus using cash. There is less friction, less pain involved. It kind of feels like magic money, and you want kids to learn these lessons before they get turned loose and potentially go into a ton of debt on a college campus.
And as an authorized user, you, the parent, get to see everything they're spending, everything they're buying, because you get the bill.
Yup, and you are legally responsible for those charges. So you do want to be mindful. I mean, definitely have that talk with your kids about what's appropriate and what you're paying for versus maybe what's their own discretionary entertainment budget. Some card issuers let you set limits, which I think could be really beneficial. Like I know Amex does that.
You know, a lot of people choose credit cards based on rewards. For some, that's a smart move. For others, it's not. We're going to talk to Sarah and Ted about that next I'm Herb Weisbaum, and this is Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
If you like what you hear, we hope you'll consider being a Consumerpedia supporter by using the link at the bottom of the show notes to make a small contribution each month. This is Consumerpedia.
People like to get paid for shopping, which is why rewards cards are so popular. Getting cash, miles, or points for every purchase is mighty appealing. The market is flooded with rewards cards. Amazon, Apple, Costco, Walmart, and Sam's Clubs offer them. There's a PlayStation credit card. Microsoft just announced an Xbox credit card. The American Kennel Club has a co-branded credit card, and so does the Susan G. Komen Foundation. Some offer some amazing sign-up bonuses. So Ted, how do I decide between all the offers and, more importantly, whether a rewards credit card even makes sense for me?
Really, the first big question is, do you carry a balance or not? Because your rewards are only going to be worth it if you can pay in full. That's just the nature of high credit card rates. Even carrying a balance for a couple of months probably outweighs any rewards you would earn. I actually have a surprising take on rewards, which is cashback is my preferred reward. And it's actually most people's preferred reward. It's funny. When I got into this business, I was kind of almost embarrassed at first that I wasn't flying to the Maldives in first class like a lot of other people who work in the credit card industry do. But, I tend to be more of the suburban dad who's looking for cash back on groceries and gas and other everyday expenses. So that's part of my advice for people, which is think about your top spending categories and think about what you want to get out of your rewards. And then also connected to that, how much complexity are you willing to take on? One thing that people really like about cashback is that it's very simple and straightforward and universal. I actually think a no annual fee, 2% cashback card, that's actually surprisingly hard to beat for most people.
Well, I use a combination of cashback and travel cards myself, but I agree it's more important to pick the rewards cards that mean something to you and actually match your lifestyle than it is to follow trends and do what your friends are doing just so you could talk to them about where they're traveling and be confused secretly. So you want to pick a card that actually suits you. I've never flown first class to the Maldives, but I have flown coach to Austria, and that was still pretty awesome. But yeah, you do want to pick something that matches your spending. And you want to think in advance, well, how do I want to use these rewards? And how easy is it to redeem the rewards for those things that I want? If a card has a very straightforward rewards program, it's easy to earn, it's easy to redeem, whether that's travel or cashback, then that is a lot better than something with this very confusing program that's potentially more rewarding, but you're going to be scratching your head every time you want to redeem rewards. So you want to really match your lifestyle and the level of effort you're willing to put in.
Well, as we know, the airlines keep making it more complicated and more costly all the time. And the problem I have with rewards cards, or what we have here at Checkbook, is that in many cases you'll make a decision based on rewards as opposed to what's the best deal. You're not going to get the best airfare. You're going to stick with whatever airline because you're trying to get the points to get that first class upgrade when you might be able to travel with another carrier and the airfare is a whole lot cheaper. That is one of the downsides.
Yeah, when it comes to airline cards specifically, you want to think about which airlines do you fly more often. If you're loyal to one particular airline, for example, let's say you live in Atlanta, most of the flights out of that airport are Delta. So maybe that might make more sense for you. But if you live in another city, I'm in Richmond, Virginia, we have all sorts of airlines that serve our airport. I'm not as loyal to one particular airline just by design. And so for me, it's more about flexibility when it comes to travel rewards. I want to be able to pick and choose airlines based on where I'm going.
Before you even get to the checkout counter, whether it's in a store or online, Ted, they're going to pitch you to get their card, and they may give you some amazing offer. You can get 20% off on the spot. What do we need to know about these retail credit cards?
They charge extremely high interest rates. The average is almost 29%. So just like we've been saying about other credit cards, but especially about store cards, if you're ever going to carry a balance, it's probably not the best fit. I do think that these cards could make sense in two scenarios. One is if you are loyal to the store and you can get 5% cash back, let's say, every time you use Amazon's card at their store or Target or Best Buy or other retailers, those 5% offers are typically better than you'd get on any other card. And then the other time is if you're making a big purchase and you can get a nice discount off that initial purchase, because that's the common sign-up bonus on store cards. I know someone who saved $1,000 on appliances by getting the store card. The key, though, is you have to pay it off right away.
And Sarah, I know you're not a big believer in instantaneously jumping at credit offers, so maybe if you're going to make that big purchase at the store, you look at their credit card offer online before you go there, and then you know whether it makes sense to apply for that credit card on the spot. Would that be the smart way to do it?
Yes, I am not a fan of making big financial decisions under duress. And under duress can include standing at the cash register, being pressured to apply for a card while there's a line of people waiting behind you.
Right.
That's not when you want to sign up for a credit card. Either do the research before you go, if you're considering it, maybe even apply for the card at home if it makes sense to you. Or if you happen to be at the store and you're given the pitch and it sounds somewhat compelling, go home and think about it and look up the card online and compare it to other options. And then if it makes the most sense for you to apply, go for it. But don't make this decision standing up under pressure. That's never a good time to do that.
Some rewards cards have sizable annual fees. Ted, you said you can find good rewards cards that don't charge an annual fee?
You can. I mean, often the rewards are a bit lower on no annual fee cards. Cashback cards are also much more likely to not charge an annual fee. I think this is part of that personalized calculation. You were talking earlier about airline cards and hotel cards, and I think those are actually a good example of when, if you're loyal, an annual fee might be worth it, because a lot of airlines, in exchange for, let's say, a $95 annual fee on their card, they might give you free checked bags for you and all your travel companions every time you fly them. So that could pay for itself in just one trip pretty easily. Now, same thing with hotels. There's often a free night every year you renew the card. So maybe you get a $200 or $300 hotel room for a $95 annual fee. It pays off if you're loyal. I mean, the more you stay with them and the more you fly with them and the more you spend with them, the more benefits you can get, including things like elite status and other perks. But same thing with store cards. If you shop there a lot, it can be well worth it. If you're only a rare shopper, you're probably better off with a general purpose card.
So, Sarah, if I have a bunch of rewards cards in my wallet, what's the smart way to use them? I know there's a strategy that how you can use these things to get the most bang for each purchase.
Well, you want to think about which card rewards you the most for what kind of spending. So maybe you have one card in your wallet that earns more at restaurants and another card that earns more at gas stations, another card that earns more at grocery stores. That means you want to use those cards in each of those situations. So no matter what purchase you're making, you're earning, let's say, 2% or more cash back. Another strategy is if you have a new card that you've just signed up for and there's a sign-up bonus, you have to hit a spending minimum to earn that bonus. And those can be worth hundreds of dollars potentially. So that might be the card you use exclusively for everything until you reach that spending minimum. And then you kind of work it into the rotation of your other cards.
And Ted, just one more time for emphasis, if you're not going to pay your balance off in full every month, you steer clear of a rewards card. It'll cost you more in the long run.
That's right. Yeah, it doesn't take long. I mean, even just a couple months of carrying a balance will probably outweigh any rewards that you might earn. So that's where it's really important to prioritize that interest rate if you have debt, either by paying in full or getting a 0% promotion or working with a reputable nonprofit credit counseling agency. Knock out that credit card debt before pursuing rewards.
So how many credit cards do you need? Is one enough or four too many? And how can you use a 0% transfer card to pay down your credit card debt? Those topics are straight ahead. I'm Herb Weisbaum, and you're listening to Consumerpedia, powered by checkbook.org.
Consumerpedia Fast Facts. So who invented the modern-day credit card? It was Frank McNamara, a businessman in New York City in 1949. At the start, his Diners Club card was only accepted at 27 restaurants in Manhattan, and the bill had to be paid in full each month. In 1958, Bank of America became the first financial institution to issue a credit card. Today, about 80% of all adults in this country have a credit card, according to the Federal Reserve. Most Americans, 7 out of 10, have a credit card by age 25.
Here's a little bit of credit card trivia for you. The first number on your credit card is called the Major Industry Identifier, or MMI. If your card starts with a 3, it's an American Express. A 4 is Visa, MasterCard start with a 5, and Discover cards begin with a 6, something you can use at the next cocktail party to break the ice. So Ted, a 2019 survey by Experian, one of the big 3 credit bureaus, found the average American had 4 credit cards. Is that too many?
It actually sounds a little high for me for most people. I would say 2 is maybe a good starting point. I'm not saying 1 just because it probably does make sense to have at least a primary and a secondary card just in case you run into trouble with one, like it's not accepted at a certain store or there's a problem with the card or something. There are also clear benefits to having more cards and kind of have this Swiss Army knife reward strategy, but you don't want to apply for too much credit all at once. This is something you can maybe gradually layer in. But my advice for most people would be, assuming you're debt-free and you don't pay credit card interest, maybe get a 2% no annual fee cashback card as a really solid foundation, and maybe layer in another card or two that really emphasizes key spending categories for your family. But as we've been saying, different circumstances require a different approach. Somebody who travels abroad a lot should really prioritize no foreign transaction fees, for example.
Sarah, what do you think?
I don't think there's a perfect number. It's really about what you can comfortably manage. And what I mean by that is, so long as you are paying all of your bills on time, you're not missing payments by accident, you're not forgetting where you're putting what charge on which card, then you're able to manage those cards well. If you are ever in a place where you are struggling to keep up with the obligation of managing these cards, it's a sign that you should probably scale it back a little bit. And there's no shame in just having one card. There's no shame in having several cards. It's really about how you manage them.
Ted, a lot of people open cards and then find out they don't use them, either because the interest rate is too high, they don't want those rewards anymore, whatever reason it is. What's the advice about closing that card, and should you only do it if maybe you're paying an annual fee and it's costing you money to keep that card?
Keeping old accounts open is often better for your credit score. And that's mainly because of what's called your credit utilization ratio, credit you're using divided by credit available to you, especially on credit cards. In other words, it's better to have more available credit and use less of it. So that's the main reason that I advise against canceling cards. You can do a product change, which means that you switch from one card from a company over to one of their other offerings. And that typically does not affect your credit score because you keep the credit line, you keep the active account. In some cases, you can even keep the same account number. That's what I would suggest if a card's no longer working for you. Call up the issuer, say, what else you got? Can you switch me to a card with different rewards or a better interest rate or a lower annual fee or something that's going to fit you better?
A balance transfer card is another tool. Sarah, how can that help someone who has a big balance they can't pay off?
Well, a balance transfer card allows you to move credit card debt from one card to a new card that has a 0% interest promotional offer. And what that can do is if you are actively making payments on your debt, but you're paying interest, this allows you to save on those interest payments for sometimes a pretty substantial period of time. We've seen offers that are close to 2 years. If you are able to pay off your debt in full before that promotion ends, again, you can save a substantial amount of money on those interest payments. The caveat is that once the promotion is over, if you still have remaining credit card debt, you're going to begin owing interest on that once again. So if you can time your payments so that you're debt-free by the time the promotion is over, that's a great way to save money. If you are at risk of remaining in debt, you want to keep in mind that that promotion is temporary.
So if you have a balance left after the promotional period ends, it doesn't go retroactive. It just goes on the amount of the balance remaining. Is that correct?
So that can depend on the kind of card. A lot of times with retail cards that you might get to make a large purchase at a particular store, the interest will retroactively be applied to the entire original borrowed balance. But with a balance transfer card not offered through a retailer, then the interest would only apply to the remaining balance.
And are those interest rates typically high?
Yep, they are about on average for what the card would charge ordinarily. So that's plus 20% oftentimes.
Ted, there's a fee to transfer the balance to one of these zero interest cards. How much are we talking about?
Generally 3 to 5%. I would say it's well worth it though, considering all the interest that you can save. The average credit card balance is around $6,000, according to TransUnion. So we're generally talking of a fee of a couple $100 to move that over. Considering that minimum payments would keep you in debt for more than 17 years and cost you about $9,000 in interest, I really like the balance transfer approach, provided that you can make real progress during the term. Don't just kick the can down the road.
So if you do get a zero interest credit card transfer card and you start making purchases with it, are you paying interest on those new purchases?
Oftentimes, those cards will have 0% interest on new purchases as well as existing balances. So look into the fine print. It does depend on the card. The downside is that it's hard to hit a moving target. And to me, it makes sense to do one or the other. You had debt in the first place for a reason. I think it's going to be harder to pay it all off within the allotted time if you mix the two. If you don't currently have credit card debt, I think a 0% introductory APR card could be a suitable way to pay for a large purchase, like some new furniture or electronics or home renovations or something. So even if they let you do both, in my mind, the recommendation would be pick one or the other, because I've seen data that about half of these 0% promos are not paid in full by the time the clock runs out. And that's when they can get really expensive.
Sarah, do you have any thoughts to add?
You really want to be careful not to view this as some sort of get out of jail free card, so to speak. We talked about using credit cards as a tool. This is a tool to wield in a very specific way to better your situation, to get yourself out of debt as quickly as you can for as low of a cost as you can. But if you start using the tool for some other purpose, it's like sticking your hammer through a window instead of using it to drive a nail into the wall. It's not going to have the final result you were hoping for. So be careful with these and use them very thoughtfully.
And for anyone listening, if you are really in trouble, you need to see a nonprofit credit counselor who can help you reduce the interest rate, help create a budget for you, and get you on the right track. In most cases, the initial consultation is free. The National Foundation for Credit Counseling can help you locate a nonprofit counselor in your area. Just go to nfcc.org. That's nfcc.org to get started. Final question for both of you. A credit card for a lot of people is set it and forget it. Should you be taking a look at the kind of credit cards that you have in your wallet every once in a while?
Oh, absolutely. That's a great exercise to do at least once a year, not just because the cards that you carry in your wallet may or may not continue to be a good fit for your lifestyle as time goes on, but also because credit card offers change all the time. So not only do you want to see what you're carrying, but you also want to compare that to what else is out there.
We found that a huge percentage of people just use the same card year after year, and I think that could be a mistake. 30% of cardholders have never switched their primary credit card. Another 13% say that it's been at least a decade since they switched. We see the same thing with checking accounts, by the way. The average person sticks with one of those for about 17 years. The market changes, your lifestyle changes. It's a competitive market.
I'm amazed at how many people who carry a balance have no idea what they're paying in interest, what the interest rate is. Do you folks find that?
Oh, yeah.
We do. Yeah. I think it's about 40% of cardholders who pay interest don't know how much interest they're paying. I know there's a temptation to bury your head in the sand, and it's not fun to talk about. We did a separate study. We found people would rather talk about politics and religion and their weight and all these sensitive things. They'd rather talk about that than credit card debt. But it's probably your highest cost debt by a wide margin. So it's important to at least be honest with yourself and your spouse if you have one, and really just make it a priority.
At least just start by looking at a recent credit card statement. Your interest rate will be on that statement. And oftentimes they'll even tell you how much interest you're paying pretty prominently. So sometimes that can be a very motivational starting point.
And when you're looking at that statement, check to see how long it would take you to pay off that balance if you only make the minimum payment, the years and years and years and years and years that it would take you if you only made the minimum.
Yeah, if you have an extra even $20 a month to throw toward that credit card debt, that's going to make a difference in the number of years it'll take to pay that debt off. And there is no greater feeling than being debt-free.
You can find a lot more information about credit cards and other personal finance topics on bankrate.com and NerdWallet. We want to thank both of you, Ted Rossman from Bankrate, Sarah Rathner from NerdWallet, for spending so much time and sharing your expertise with us.
I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you, Herb. Always a good time.
Well, that's it for this edition of Consumerpedia. We hope you'll rate this episode and follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Remember, we release new episodes every other Thursday. Another way you can support this show is to follow us on Consumerpedia on Facebook and Instagram, and at My Consumerpedia on Twitter. I'm Herb Weisbaum. Thanks for listening.
Consumerpedia is a public service of checkbook.org. We're a unique nonprofit that helps you save money and make smarter choices. You can count on Checkbook to help you find the best services and avoid the worst, with local ratings that are accurate and unbiased. If you live in or around these 7 cities and haven't joined Checkbook yet, check us out. Boston, Chicago, Philadelphia, Seattle, San Francisco, Minneapolis-St. Paul, and Washington, D.C. To get your free 30-day subscription, go to checkbook.org/consumerpedia. If you like what you've heard, we hope you'll become a supporter. by using the link at the bottom of the show notes to make a small contribution each month. Consumerpedia, empowering consumers to save money and make smarter choices.